Daf. Okay, Be'ez Hashem. Today's daf is Daf Chav Gimel, and we'll begin on Daf Chav Beis of a Beis by the Mishnah. So the Mishnah begins: Hakoil Kesherin Lichtoi Vesaget. Every person is kosher to write a get. Afil Cherish, even if he's deaf mute, which is somebody considered to be insane, shaita, an imbecile. V'kata, and even somebody under bar mitzvah could write a get. Now, right away, you're going to ask a question. Wait a second. Doesn't we know that it has to be written lishma, right? Doesn't the get have to be written lishma? That means that when the cipher is writing the get, he has to know precisely, have in mind when he's writing up the get who he's writing for, who's the husband, who's the wife. So therefore, he can't be like focused on something else. So how can we trust a cheresh shaita v'katan to write the get? So based on this, but you have to know, just I'm bringing up the screen where it says v'kosav law, sefer. Since the Torah wrote it v'kosav law, you have to write it for her sake. So it seems from the Torah that you have to write the whole get, the words and the names all have to be written lishma, and that is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer holds that when you write the get, it has to be written lishma. So therefore, he has to resolve this part of the Mishnah. How could it be that everybody's kosher to write a get? But there is an opinion, Rab Meir, who we've encountered, that he holds that what makes the get effective is the signatures of the Eidim. When Eidim sign on the get, that makes it an effective get. And therefore, when the Torah says you have to write it for her sake, the Torah doesn't mean you write the get for her sake. According to Rab Meir, you can buy a whole get at the Judaica store. It's the sima, it's the Eidim that sign on the get, have to know who the husband and who the wife is. So we're going to resolve this part of the Mishnah. So anyway, the Mishnah just said that everybody is permitted to write a get, even a cheresh shaita v'katan. Ha'isha kesevas is gita. We learned before that the husband has to pay for the get, right? He has to own the paper. But this Mishnah says that the woman can write up the get, and then, of course, he writes the get and gives it over to him. And as if like she 100% thinks that she is giving it 100% over to him. Now he owns the get, and he can get it signed, and we give it back to her, and that's good enough. The man can write his receipt. Really, when a woman receives her ksuba money, she's supposed to write the receipt and pay for the paper and give it to the man. But if the man has the paper, he can write up the receipt and have in mind that he's giving it over to her. Now she owns the receipt, and she just like signs it and gives it back to him, and that works as well. Now the Mishnah ends off, "Ein kiyum get ela b'choismav." This is a little cryptic statement. What makes a get correct? Only with the signatures. That makes it effective. The way you're going to learn who's the author of this Mishnah, Rab Eliezer or Meir, will determine how you understand this latter part of the Mishnah. That there's what makes a get, it's only the signatures. So the Gemara asked right away the question: how could it be that a shaita, a katan, a cherish could write a get? They're not anybody that has any type of focus, and they don't know how to write lishma. In other words, they can't focus their mind. They can't focus their mind to think about the man and the lady that they're writing up the get for. So how could they could be kosher soifrim? Amar Rav Huna said, we go to Chaf Gimel Laman Aleph, it's talking about when there's an adult standing on top of him and on top of the cheresh shaita and cotton, and it's telling him exactly what to write for, and you're writing it for the sake of this man. So therefore, I guess the adult that's standing right on top of this child, this cheresh shaita with cotton, he's focusing his mind, and therefore that's how you learn our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is Rab Eliezer. Rab Eliezer holds that the ksiva has to be written lishma. But if you're using a katan, if there's a gadol standing over him and watching over him and instructing him how to write lishma, then it's kosher. That's the Mishnah of our Mishnah, because that's how Rab Eliezer learns our Mishnah. Now you could extend that when let's say in a matzah bakery, where the matzah has to be l'shem matzah mitzvah. So why can't you have people who are not bar mitzvah roll out the matzah and have a gadol watch over them? So we have to know how much do you extend this idea of gadol omer al gabav to make something lishma. But clearly the Gemara says it would work by get. Amalei Rav Nachman says, if there's this idea that if somebody does not know how to write lishma, or somebody's not kosher to write a get, if there's an adult male who is kosher to write a get supervising, then it's kosher. El Miata, let us say like this: goy, if you have a goy who's writing a get, right, a Spanish guy writing the get, the Yisrael oimed al gabav, and if Yisrael is watching and supervising, hachinami the kosher, will you say that it's kosher, that it's a kosher get? So yes, why not? There's a supervisor, and he's telling him how to write lishma. The chitema, are you going to say hachiname, that it's true that a goy, a Yisrael oimed al gabav, will make a get kosher, even if the goy is writing it. But Tanya, but we have an open brisa, goy puzzle. A goy that's writing up a get is puzzle. So why? How can you resolve that? Why can't a Jew supervise the goy writing the get? Answers the Gemara, goy l'daita de nafshe ovid. There's a big difference. You can supervise a kid under bar mitzvah and tell him to focus his mind, and he's not going to have anything in mind except what you tell him. So therefore, it's kosher. But a guy who's an adult, if you're going to supervise him, he's doing it, he's thinking about whatever he wants to think about, and he's not going to be paying attention to the gadol, Yisrael Omer al Gabo. And therefore, a guy would be possible even if there's a Yisrael Omer al Gabo. So that's the first answer. Our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Lezer, and our Mishnah forgot to mention that we said that a katan is writing the get is only if he's being supervised by a gadol. Hada Amar Rav Nachman says there's another terence. Lav milsehi da amri. Whatever I said, don't count, and because everything is even. I'm going to tell you that a goy could write up a get. How about that? Everybody could write up a get. In fact, a katan could write up a get because you don't need the ksiva to be written lishma. Now, how do I know? We're going to learn a Mishnah that says a goy can't be a shliach. Okay, a goy cannot be a messenger, let's say, on behalf of the man to give over the get to his wife. You have to use a Jewish shliach. So a goy is puzzled, the Mishnah says, he can't be used regarding being a shliach to bring the get to her. But it makes no mention in our Mishnah of what about a goy writing up a get. Michlal, we can derive the le'inyan ksiva kosher, that if a goy writes up a get, it would be kosher. So therefore, our Mishnah holds that you do not need lishma when you're writing up a get. So plain, very simple. Our Mishnah goes according to, he doesn't speak this out, but we'll speak it out. Our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Meir says that you don't need ksiva lishma. You can buy the whole get from the Judaica store. So therefore, a goy could write up the get, a katan could write up a get, and that would be kosher. So there's one thing to resolve. But isn't there a brisa that says goy? If a goy writes a get, it's possible. So the Gemara says, yes, I'll agree to that, says Rav Nachman. That brisa is Rab Lazahi. The Rama Eidim Misirikarze. He holds that there is no, you don't really need Eidim to sign on a get. In fact, you don't need it at all. What makes the get effective is not that when he gives it over to her privately, he has to give it to her publicly in front of two Eidim. When they see him giving a get to her, even though there's no Eidim signed on it, it's kosher. So according to Rabbi Lezer, when the Torah says v'kos of law, yet you have to write it lishma, it means the ksiva has to be written lishma. Or being ksiva lishma, it has to be written lishma. But it's for sure certain goy adaited the nafshik of it. He's not thinking about the man and the woman. He's doing it whatever he's thinking about. And therefore, a goy to write up a get, according to Rabbi Lazar, is puzzle. But our Mishnah, who validates a katan and a imbecile to write a get, and probably would validate a goy to write up a get, goes according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir doesn't hold of the concept of a ksiva has to be lishma, only the chasima. And Amar Rav Nachman went further. Rabbi Meir would have his opinion. Even if you found a get in the garbage, but lo and behold, it's Ruvain divorcing Sarah, and the names are the same. So if you found the get in the garbage and it didn't have any signatures on it, and he signed it and gave it to her, Mr. Ruvain found the get and gave it to his wife Sarah. Kosher, it's kosher because even though it's not written lishma, Rav Meir doesn't hold of this idea. It has to be written lishma. So the Gemara asks, Esvei, Rav Nachman, Esvei, Rav Nachman. Rav asked Rav Nachman, The Torah says, the Brisa says, because of law, that you have to write a get lishma. Lishma. My love, doesn't the Brisa mean kasivas a get? The whole template of the get, the whole name and her name has to be written lishma. Doesn't that what the Brisa mean? Loy, not so. Chasimis Edom. When the Torah wrote because of law, it means the signatures of the Edom have to be lishma. That's question number one. Question number two, Esvei Rava. Rava asked the question, Kol get shenichtav shloi l'shim isha pasul. A Brisa says, any get that wasn't made and written for the sake of the woman, it's pasul. So we see that you have to write the get lishma. So the Gemara says, no, shenechtam shloi l'shim isha pasul. If it was signed without the signers knowing who they're signing for, then it's pasul. But the ksiva doesn't have to be lishma. Same question again, Esvei. Another brisa. When you write a get, it's as if you wrote the whole get lishma. So what does this mean? It's a cryptic statement. When you write it, it's as if you wrote the whole get lishma. So my love, doesn't this mean like this? When you write, Torah is the revealed part of the get, which means the name, her name, the name of the city. If you write that lishma, then you don't need to write the whole template. It's as if you wrote the whole template, the regular standard statement that's on every get. It's as if written lishma, because the main thing that has to be written lishma is the Torah, is the revealed part, which indicates who owns this get and who's giving it to whom. But what you see is that the Torah has to be written lishma. His name and her name have to be written lishma. So it's clearly, it says the Gemara law, you're reading it wrong. The Brisa is not talking about the template or the get itself. It's talking about when you sign a get lishma, it's kilu kaisu lishma, it's if you wrote the whole get lishma. So again, every time in these brises it says you have to write lishma, we interpret it doesn't mean you have to write it lishma. It means you have to sign it lishma, and the author of these brises were Rameir. The Iba is saying, if you want, I can tell you, money, those brises that you just asked me a question, Rab Lezer, the Ama Edi Mesira Karse. It's Rab Lezer who holds Edi Mesira Karse, and he holds Ksiva, you have to write Ksiva Lishma. But Rabbi Meir doesn't hold the Ksiva Lishma. Rabbi Meir's a Tana. He can argue on these brises, so you can't ask such a question. So far, we have two answers to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says a Katan or a Charishite of a Katan can write a get. Either our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Lezer and there's a Gadol supervising, or our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Meir and there is no Gadol supervising, because you don't need a get to be written Lishma. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rabbi Yehuda says, he gives a third teretz. Really, our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Lezer. And there is no Gadol Omer Agabov. So why could a Katan write a get? Because he's writing the template of the get, and he's leaving over a space for the Torah, the revealed part of the get. So it's really Rabbi Lezer, the author of our Mishnah is Rabbi Lezer, and basically there's no supervision, but the Katan didn't write the whole get. He just left over a space for the name, his name, her name, and that you have to write Lishma. It's the same idea that our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Lezer, and you left over the revealed part of the get. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Zikra, Rabbi Yochanan ain't a Torah. Rabbi Zikra, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, said it's not Torah. This is what you're saying, that this Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Lezer is not Torah. Man ain't a Torah. What do you mean it's not Torah? Rabbi Abba explained what Rabbi Yochanan meant. This Mishnah has to tell you a very clear statement. She'ein koyach lishma. There's no power to writing a get lishma, because Rabbi Meir, our Mishnah is certainly Rabbi Meir. The Ama Eidi Chasima character. Our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Meir, and therefore only the signatures matter, and therefore a Katan could write up a get. Says the Gemara, you're saying our Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan said that our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Lezer, that the author of these Mishnayos, we find yesterday's Mishnah, that the Rabbi Babachana said that the author of that Mishnah was Rabbi Lezer. So it may be that this Mishnah is also Rabbi Lezer. Answers the Gemara, you're right. Rabbi Yochanan, Amaroy Ninu Valibid Rabbi Yochanan. It's a machlekes Amaroyim, what Rabbi Yochanan held and who the author of these Mishnayos. One Amoira in the name of Rabbi Yochanan held that the author of these Mishnayos is Rabbi Lezer, and another Amoira held that the author of these Mishnayos is Rabbi Meir. Next Mishnah. Now this Mishnah is talking about shlichus. Who can be the one to bring the get to the woman? Hakol kasherin lahavius a get. Every woman, every man, every human being could be kosher to be a shliach for a get. What's except mecher shoyte v'katan. Again, mecher shoyte v'katan, they can't be a get. Visuma and a blind person. A blind person cannot be a shliach. The goy, and a goy can't be a shliach either. We'll see all that in the Gemara. Let's say the katan, the guy on the bar mitzvah accepted the get from the man, and before he gave it over to her, he turned bar mitzvah. The higdil. So when he accepted the get from the man, he was a katan, but then he became bar mitzvah. Cheirish v'nispakeach. Let's say he was deaf and he became sane. Suma if he was blind v'nispakeach, and he became somebody who has sight. Shoyte v'nishtapa. He was an imbecile, and his mind turned normal. Goy, if he was a goy when he accepted the get from the man, vinis gayer, and he became a ger. Puzzle, he's still puzzled to be a shliach, because when he got the mission to be a shliach, he was somebody that was not valid to be a shliach. He was a goy, he was a shaiti, he was a katan, he was a blind person. Therefore, that's no good. Aval, let's say he was normal when he became a shliach, but then he had a mishap in between, and then he became normal again. If he was sane and then he got deaf, then he became normal again. He was a sighted person, then was blind for a little bit, and then he became unsighted. Shafoi, he was sane, and became insane, and then he became sane again. All these is kosher, because this is the general rules. If when he accepted the mission, he had his mind, he had his marbles. Even though in the middle, between, he became insane, he had a breakdown. But since he became sane again, he's still kosher to complete the mission and remain a shliach. So the Gemara asks the question: I understand very well why a cheres shoyte v'katan cannot be a shliach. The la b'nei deyanin. Again, they don't have any mind. And in order to be a shliach, Rashi explains, we learned it from a pasuk that says, that just like a man, one person can bring the carbon pesach on behalf of his family, and the pasuk says ish, it has to be a man, somebody who has das and awareness. And cheres shoyte v'katan don't have awareness about themselves, so therefore they're not good for being a shliach. Goy name, a goy cannot be a shliach, the la bar hateruhu. He's not involved into the kedushin. There's no kedushin regarding them, and since they themselves are not in the parsha of Gittin kedushin, they cannot act as a shliach. You have to be somebody who in the mitzvah of Gittin and kedushin, and then you could be a shliach. Ela suma amai loy, but suma is chayiv in all mitzvahs, and he's in the parsha of Gittin and kedushin. Why can't he be why can't he be a shliach? Amar Rav Sheshes says, it's interesting, Rav Sheshes himself was blind, and he explains why blind people cannot be a good shliach. He doesn't know who he's taking it from and who he's giving it to. So it's a psal d'rabbanan, because he can be certain that the husband is giving it to him, and he's giving he has to rely on other people, and he's giving it over to the woman. So therefore, they passel the summa from being a shliach. Maskif lo Rav Yosef, heich summa muta b'ishtoi. If you're always assuming a blind man doesn't know what he's talking about, and I think Rav Yosef was also blind, I'm not sure. How could a blind person ever be with his wife? In other words, heich b'nei adam mutar m'neshasem b'layla. How could any person at night be with his wife at night? If you need to see everything, then you can never be sure that you're with the right woman. Maybe it's not your wife. Maybe the summa, the blind person, is not with his wife. So how can we trust that? Ella, what do we say? Bitvias eina dekola. He can recognize in his mind eye. The blind person can recognize in his mind eye the sound, the coil, the sound. Maybe echolocation. They could really a blind person has a tuned hearing. Perhaps he could recognize his wife. So hakanami the tvias eina dekola. So why don't we say he could be a shliach? Is saying he doesn't know who the husband is, who the wife is. He'll recognize the voice, who he knows. He knows who's the wife, who's the husband, and he'll know who's giving a get to whom. And why can't he be a shliach? Ella Amar Rav Yosef says you're right. He could be a shliach, and we trust that he knows what he's doing. But to be a shliach, our Mishnah is talking about in chutz la'aretz. The boy he has to say, in front of me, this get was written. In front of me, it was signed. And he can't say that because you have to say those exact words. So even though he knows what he's doing, but he can't say certainly, I saw it being written, I saw it being signed, and therefore he can't be a shliach to bring a get from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael. Elamiyata, let us say like this. If you're saying a blind person's good, Pesuach v'nistamei, let's say he saw, and then he became blind, the Matzi Amar, he could say, because he saw, when he saw in Chutz La'aretz, he saw the get being written and signed, so who cares if he became blind later on? Hachinami de kosher. He should be kosher because he actually could say b'fani nechvan. And if that's the case, Valkatani, the Mishnah says pesuach v'nistame b'chasan nispatea kosher. The only time a summa could be a kosher shliach if he saw, became blind, and then he got healed and sees again. Chazam nistapeach ed. Loy chazam nistapeach loy. But if he sees again, then he could be a shliach. If he doesn't see again, he cannot be a shliach. But why not? He could say b'fani nechtam. So why does our Mishnah say he has to be able to see again? And says the Gemara, you're right. Our Mishnah is not precise. Who are in the apelgav loy chazam nistapeach? Our Mishnah, even if he never became sight, he saw sight again, he could still be a shliach because he had sight when he saw the get being written, and so he could be the shliach. And he only lost the sight later on. I did the a sane person that became insane and it became sane. That only works if he becomes sane again. But if he never becomes sane again, that would never work because he's not in the parsha of shlichus. He cannot be a shliach if he's still insane. So Tani Nami, so to make it all aligned, it says it also by a blind person that he saw, became blind, and sees again. But it's not precise. Even if he never saw again, he could still be a shliach. Amar Ravashi, Deikanami. Our Mishnah is also says a precise language. The Mishnah says, so our Mishnah says that the criteria is that in the beginning and the end, you have to have intelligence. Kosher, like Kotani called to Yilasa V'Seifim Bekasher kosher Shmamino. The Mishnah doesn't say that the beginning and the end you have to be kosher. That's not necessarily true because you could be in the beginning kosher and not kosher in the end, and you could still be a good shliach because you already accomplished what you need to know. You need to know how to say b'fani nechta. Also, but it's only if you don't have intelligence. Then you need chilasei v'soifa b'das. That's why our Mishnah says only if you're in the beginning and the end have intelligence, only then are you kosher. They asked a question from Rabbi Ami. Another question. Evid mahu shiyasa shliach lekabel git lishamayad bala. A slave, can he be a shliach to accept the get from the hands of a master? In other words, can the shliach, and it could work both ways. Can a shliach be can a evid be a shliach? Not only if the man makes him a shliach. Can a woman make an eved a shliach to accept the get on her behalf? Amalahu, so Rabbi Ami answered, the midikol pasale legoy. Since we pasal the goy, only a goy cannot be a shliach. She can't make a goy a shliach. We go to Amud Beis. Michlal, we can say the eved kosher. An eved would be a kosher shliach. So an eved would be a kosher shliach. That's the opinion of Rabbi Ami. Amar Ravasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Eino eved nasa shliach lekabel get liyishim yad baila. An eved cannot be a shliach. Because he's not in the parsha of Gittin v'kedusha, so he cannot be a shliach. In order to be a shliach, you have to be somebody that shlichus that you can deal with that. But you're in the parsha of shlichus. And Eved doesn't marry a shivcha knainis. He doesn't use a kedushin. That what we said in the Mishnah, by the way, that an Eved could be a get is you're not using him to be a shliach, you're using him to be the get or to hold on to a get. So an eved could be a chotzer, a courtyard, but he cannot be a messenger. So the Gemara asks a question. Maskav lo Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef asked, "Tama the milsa delayse, holba milsa the isay kosher." It's only because if he's not involved in something, if he's not in the parsha, he can't be a shliach. But if he's in the parsha of something, you're telling me for sure he could have been a shliach. That's not always the case. Examine this case. A goy, vakusi. A goy, the isnai b'taris truma denafshe. A goy, let's say he owns a field in Israel. He owns it by himself. If he says, I want to make this truma, it really is truma. The Tanah we learned in the Mishnah, and a kohen and a Yisrael cannot eat that. The Tanah we learned in the Mishnah, Hagoy vakusi shetarma mishlem, goyim that made truma. They said that this wheat should be truma, trumas and truma. It's a good truma. Utnan, and we learned in the Mishnah. So then we see a goy is in the parsha of truma. That's for sure. Utnan, goy shatan shel Yisrael filu b'shus. A goy that was a shliach on behalf of Yisrael to take truma from the Yisrael's produce, ain't trumas and truma. It doesn't work. Ma'atama, what's the reason? La mishum diksiv gam atem. When the Torah says the concept of shlichus, that a man could hire a shliach to take off truma on his produce, the Torah says you should take off truma, and also you should take off truma. What's the also you? Ma'atem Yisrael. Just like you, if you took off the truma, you're a Jewish person. Af shluchachem, when you make a shliach, it has to be a Jewish person. So we see that although the guy is in the concept of truma, he cannot be a shliach of truma. So let us say the same thing that you said, that if an eved was in the pasha of Gittin Kedushin, he would be allowed to be a shliach, but that's not true. Not always is that case. You could be in the pasha of something and not be a shliach. And says the Gemara, no. Amri debei Rabbi Yanai loy. Really, an eved could even be a shliach for truma, and it's only a goy cannot be a shliach truma. It's only limited by a goy. Va'atem b'nei bris. The Torah requires that the person that you're using for shliach to take over truma has to be somebody who has a bris milah, and a goy does not have a bris milah, so he can't be a shliach. So an eved has one up, that if he's in the parsha of something, for example, if he owns a field and then the Odain has no bailus over that field, then he could be a shliach. Since he's in the parsha of truma, he could also be a shliach of truma. Amar Rabbi Yochanan bar Abba Rabbi Yochanan. He holds no. Rabbi Yochanan said an eved cannot be a good kosher shliach. The fishein of Torah Gittin the kedushin. And now va'afal pisha sheninu. Even though I said harei at shivchase uladech ben chayred, a man goes over to his maidservant, right, a goyish maid, and he said, you and your child should be free. So in Hoysa Ubara, if she was pregnant, Zachsalai, then the fetus, the embryo inside of her, goes free. So where did this come in? My im Hoysa Ubara Zachsalai. What did Rabbi Yochanan try to shichra? What did the get shichra have to do with Eved? Rabbi Yochanan made a statement that an Eved cannot be a shliach to on behalf of the woman to accept a get. And then you're now bringing in when a master frees his shifcha kanainis, his pregnant shifcha kanainis. What is the connection between these two? Something is missing over here. So ki asa Amar Rav Shmuel, ki asa Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Amar, he explained, Rabbi Yochanan tartik Amar, Rabbi Yochanan said two laws. Nirim dvarim she'eved mekabel get lechaveira miyad rabbi shel chaveira. I think that an eved, let's say you have two avodim belonging to two different people. So one eved could accept the get from the other guy's master for the sake of the other eved. So Ruvain's eved could accept a get shichra from Shimon if Shimon wants to free his own eved. Avaloi miyad rabbi shaloi, but he can't accept a get for himself. And that means if Ruvain owns two avodim, so Ruvain owns two avodim, Ruvain cannot give Eved A if he wants to free Eved B, because since he owns both avodim, when he gives Eved A, it's as if he gave it to nobody, because whatever he gives Eved A belongs back to him, so it's not a good freedom. When a person wants to free his own Eved, so you give him the get shikra, and then you say it happens at the same time. But when you're giving one Eved to take the get shikra on behalf of the other Eved that you own, it will not work. If someone's going to whisper to you and say, wait a second, I'm telling you something clear. The Mishnah says that a shivcha, kanainis, could accept the get shichra on behalf of the embryo that's inside of him. So wait a second, you see that the Adain owns two people over here. He owns the shivcha kanainis and he owns the baby inside of her. And yet the shivcha could accept the get on behalf of the embryo. How does that work? And Malay, you'll tell him, explain to him, it works very simple, because the embryo is considered part of the woman. Shnei Gedolei Adar Pirshas Udarva, Rab Zera, Rab Shmuel Bar Yitzchak. Chad Ama Hamani Rebbe. That Mishnah that says that the woman accepts the get shikra on behalf of her baby, it's Rebbe, the Omah HaMashachar Chatzi Avdoi Kana, that if you free a half a slave, if someone gives you a half of, if the Adoin tells the Eved, half of you is free, half of you is free. And explain it further. So wait a second. You have a pregnant woman, you're trying to free half of her? Yes. When you're pregnant, a woman's pregnant, it's not like there's two people over here. It's the baby inside is just half her. And therefore, it's as if he said you could own part of your body. And therefore, this Shikha Kanainis could accept the get Shikra on behalf of the baby inside of her. One more minute and we'll finish the Mishnah. Mishnah says, Af hanoshim she'einin nemhonas loime meispala nemhonas lahabi eskita. We know that there are certain women that hate each other. And if they say to a woman, oh, your husband died, we don't trust them because these women want to mess you over. They want to mess this lady over. But those women that are not believed to say your husband died will be believed to be a shliach and say that, oh, your husband gave me your get to give to you. Who's the women that hate you? Chamoisa, her mother-in-law, Ubas Chamoisa, the daughter of her mother-in-law, Vitzarasa and her co-wife, Viyavimta and her brother's wife, because her brother's wife hates this woman, because there's a chance that they will be co-wives in case if this one of the brothers dies without children. Ubas Bala and her stepdaughter from her husband. So therefore, these people, even though we assume there's animosity between them and the lady they want to deliver the get, they're still believed to say that this get was written kosher and she could get married based on that. So the Gemara asks, "My ben get limi." So why do we trust them when it comes to get, but we don't trust them to say that the husband died? Because you could look into the paper and see that it's signed, and it takes a lot to forge a document. So therefore, we trust them if they bring a get that they're saying the truth. Isha Atzma, the Mishnah concludes, Isha Atzma Maviyas Gita, a woman could bring her own get, which says that it won't take effect until she gets to Eretz Yisrael. She herself will say, she has to say to two people that I saw this get being written and I saw that's being signed, and that way she makes her own get kosher. So ends Daf Chof Gimel.